um, for that. And going very much ahead of schedule, we are going to also start another new part of our Board of Governors meetings, and that is, we're all doing work outside of these meetings. All of you governors and staff belong to committees that are working on the policies and developing the issues referred to by this committee, and we don't always hear from every committee. So maybe not a lot's going on, but I think it's an important process that we do a check-in every time we have a Board of Governors meeting so that everyone else knows what's going on with the committees and their work. And if we could go ahead and start with the Apex Awards Committee and Governor Russell Knight.
Thank you. So the Apex Awards Committee will begin seeking nominations for the Apex Award recipients. That awards ceremony is in September of every year, so in the next few months we'll get those requests out and start thinking about people that would be deserving of an award.
Thank you, Governor Knight. And next we have the Budget and Audit Committee, Treasurer Dan Clark.
Okay, I did a. It's in the written stuff. I did one, but also. Okay, there's something else I wanted to add, and I'll have Jorge read it if you don't mind. I'll just give you sure that.
So the materials, the written report is on page 50. The written report is on page 51 of the materials. In addition, we just completed the FY 2019 preliminary financials through September. We ended up with higher revenue than expected due to increased membership that was assumed versus budget, and we came in under in our expenses. Overall, for 2019, we ended with $940,000 in increased net income versus budget, and net income, including the reduction in expenses, obviously, for the WASBA General Fund. We also ended in a net income over expense of $588,000 for the year for the Client Protection Fund after paying out gift payments to injured members of the public and all indirect and direct costs.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next we have Personnel Committee with Governor Stevens.
Personnel met on October 21st. There are two pending action items later on this agenda that will be before the board. One is an action item regarding a proposed bylaw amendment. So this will be for first read, but that would be for setting a term limit for the position of executive director. Just so everybody's understanding this, because it took me a while to get it. It is not setting what a particular hiring term is going to be, but the actual total number of years that somebody may serve in that capacity. And so that'll be coming up later on, and we've recommended a 10-year term limit. The second item is actually also regarding the executive director, and personnel has a lot of activity that it was projecting around a process for hiring the next executive director, but because of, I think, very good comments from the members, we are proposing to you today, and we'll get into that in detail when we come up with it, but we're proposing that the interim executive director's contract be extended a year, and so we'll talk about that. There are other pending items still working through personnel. One is a proposal to remove the executive director's hiring authority for general counsel and chief disciplinary counsel. Another one is establishing annual compensation for the executive director. But I think the biggest amount of work, and one that I hope we'll have at least some conversation about, is actually a hiring process for the executive director. And I will wait until later to give comments about that. But even with a extension, my view is that doesn't mean we don't get ourselves ready and prepared to have a process. And since the last executive director was a 15-year incumbent, and the one before that, I don't know if it was 7 years or so, but this is an opportunity to align what we say we want with ensuring that all segments of WSBA are involved in who is hired to be the next executive director. Because if things work out as one would hope when we make that hire, if you pass the bylaw amendment we're talking about, if that person performs well, then the next opportunity is going to be 10 years from now or 10 years from next year. So those are the things that we have. I want to thank all the members of the Personnel Committee, and we will be having a meeting in December, and we'll be looking forward to reporting back to you in January regarding those items.
Thank you, Governor Stevens. Next, we have Governor Cicchetti is not here for the Legislative Committee. I believe when he runs into this room, sweating profusely and breath heavy because of his commitment to be here after driving up from Olympia, hopefully not violating any civil laws of our great state. I believe he'll have a number of things to talk to you about, both the Legislative BOG Committee, which is what he's here to talk about, but also the Legislative Review Committee. One of the ideas that's been kicked around this year is how do we make those committees coordinate better and smoother and more efficiently? Much like we used to have a separate BOG Diversity Committee and a Members Diversity Committee, maybe it's time to think about unifying those committees. Another thing that Governor Cicchetti, I imagine, would say if he was here was one issue that's come up with us, raised by members, was that ABA resolutions often happen faster than our Board of Governor meetings occur. And the ABA weighs in on a lot of things, and a lot of them have to do with very GR 12.2 appropriate issues. And an idea that has been raised is, well, maybe the Legislative Committee should be authorized by this board to also deal with ABA matters and ABA resolutions, much like they're authorized by this board out of necessity to deal with fast-acting legislative matters. When it comes time to discuss the Legislative Committee later on, which we do have it on the agenda later on in today's meeting, I hope someone might make a motion to that effect, but we will see. Anyways, I think Governor Cicchetti might have some more to say on the matter. Next, we have the Nominations Review Committee, which is co-chaired by Governor Kang and Governor Cicchetti, and I see Governor Kang.
Thank you. And I'm going to take a pass on that because we have yet to meet, and I believe we are meeting today after today's session.
Yeah. Nominations Committee is one of the most fascinating committees. I call it one of the most powerful, low-profile committees. The Board of Governors will see from time to time an email come out from its staff liaison saying, hey, this is what Nominations Committee did. Basically, our process is that Nominations Committee reviews applicants for the many, many hundreds of nominations of posts that this BOG puts forward. But because that would take up so much time, we've delegated this task to the Nominations Committee. However, understanding that it's the full purview of this joint body to make those decisions, this Board of Governors has an opportunity to review the decisions made by the Nominations Committee and veto or ask it to be pulled and considered. So that's why you're getting those emails, and that gives you a little more context. That's not something I understood when I first came on the board, and I didn't really understand it until I started chairing the Nominations Committee, actually. Next, we have Governor Swagel and the Long Range Planning Committee.
Actually, I think you
because
skipped
I
over
saw
me.
your name twice. I'm sorry. We also have the Diversity Committee, which is co-chaired by Laura Sanford, who is present, and Governor Jean Kang, I think. And
Laura Wolf.
Oh, I'm sorry. Very apologies. Apologies to everyone. But I do see Governor Kang.
Thank you. And I actually do have a lot to report. We have met twice already. September was our orientation, and then we had a teleconference a couple of weeks ago. So the committee has been working very hard, and we discussed kind of our goals and what we're going to do this year and hopefully accomplish. We discussed pipeline programming and how we can collaborate with programs that already exist, including MBA programmings, and we also discussed youth and law programs with the Pierce County MBA, the Color of Justice program that started in Pierce County, Board of Judicial Administration programs, lawyers, judges in the classroom, and how the committee might reach out to the firms in the area and also work with them to either get financial support or have them invest in pipeline programming like the 1L fellowship. So these are all kind of ideas that we are discussing. We are already scheduled to have networking events down in Tacoma. It's the UW Tacoma Legal Pathways Program, which is scheduled next year, I believe in March and April. So we have members already signed up and to go to that to connect with the Pierce County members and the law students down there. Further, the committee has discussed increasing efforts to actively recruit for WISPA committees and boards. That's something that we're really stressing on this year. Also discussed how the committee could help build safe spaces for sharing stories and experiences. So attorneys, we fight to protect others, but sometimes we ourselves are victimized in the profession. So how do we encourage others to speak up and seek support, which is critical at this time. The committee also brainstormed CLE ideas, legal lunchbox ideas, and beyond the dialogue events that the committee could put on for the members. We've already had a couple events. The members of the committee has attended and participated as panelists at the 1L UW Diversity Fellowship panel, and Sunitha was also there. I was there. It was a great panel discussion, and I do want to share this with the Board of Governors. The intent was to chat about how you apply for the fellowships, but the conversation quickly shifted to the health of our legal community and our profession. The students discussed issues regarding mental health and trauma that they experienced, and they asked questions about how our profession currently is dealing with diversity, inclusion, and attorneys with trauma. So they're already talking about that. Additional pipeline work with law students and law schools. We have another event scheduled for January 9th. We have in-person reviews of resumes and personal statements. So the members are busy. We're working really hard and reaching out and networking. We're also trying to find other ways to work with law students at SU and Gonzaga. And some of the members went to the MeLaw annual event, and we talked about how important it is to show support by showing up and continuing to build allyship. So there's that, and there are other various projects in the works. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor King, and thank you, Laura Wolf and Governor King, for your leadership, and thank you to all the members of the Diversity Committee. As someone who is a member of that committee for a very long time, I really love all the activities and the motion that's going on in there. Thank you all for that. Next, we have the Long Range Planning Committee and Governor Swagel.
Thank you, President Majumdar. The committee has not yet met, but we have a meeting scheduled for December 10. We're still wondering if we might move that meeting to accommodate Governor Grabicki's schedule, and we're also considering the possibility of holding our meeting in Spokane. As a further accommodation and to get around the state. Some of the things we'll probably be looking at in the first meeting is whether or not to make some changes to the bylaws, in support of the mission and in support of, sort of improving our processes, procedures, and framework.
Wonderful. I guess moving the long range planning meeting to Spokane might have some beautiful, ironic appropriateness to it. And thank you. And I want to thank Governor Swagel for taking up this committee, because I think it's been somewhat of an inactive committee for a number of years. And I think that's been a criticism I've heard from some members and staffers. What is the long-term focus? What is the plan forward? So I'm glad that we're going to be engaging in that process and looking into these materials. Next, we have the Member Engagement Work Group, which is co-chaired by Governor Hunter and Governor Clark, and I suspect Governor Hunter will want to speak on this matter.
This is, a lot of this is from Dan. This is much better at writing than I am. Oh. Okay, is that working? Thank you, Paul. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Is the red light on?
The little light's on.
Move it closer. There you go. Move it closer.
Can everybody hear me now?
There you go.
It could be all the debris around your area there.
It's probably all the magnets in there. As I said, or tried to say, this is largely Dan responsible for this memo because he writes better than I do. But we've had a couple of meetings, and Dan and I have chatted over the phone a number of times. And I have to say before I get started that Kevin has been a tremendous help, and we probably wouldn't be able to do anything without Kevin. And Paris, as always, has stepped right up. What we're doing right now is to try to get a format going. We had at the committee meeting, we kind of discussed our goals, which is in the proposal that I did initially to get the committee going. Dan, the two Dans, went to the WSBA sections annual meeting and kind of introduced what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it. Obviously, we're looking at engaging with the county bar associations, a lot of the sections, the minority and specialty bars, with a couple of goals to get member feedback, increase the member interaction with WSBA, and just go out there and have a presence and discuss both ways what's going on. One thing that we may be looking at is making, instead of going to like an hour of their lunchtime, trying to make some events that are fun and family oriented, but still is an interaction with bar members and the Board of Governors. It's going to be a very interactive meeting. We're not going to go and just talk at them. We want to go and mingle and chat with them and get to know their families if they bring their families, that kind of thing. Make it a very personal experience. And I think if you do that, it's easier for people to say, I have an issue with this, and I'd like to chat with you about it. And maybe some things that we could bring up to the Board of Governors and try to work through it. So we're looking possibly at revising our charter. It was based on a couple of years old. So soon, probably Dan will be drafting that because he just does it so well, and we'll present it at a future date. But we, obviously, if we go to someone else's district, we will certainly let that person know, and of course, invite them along for any of these interactions so that we can all be involved in this. I think, is that good, Kevin? Okay, great. So it's still in its infancy, but we're going to go for it.
Thank you, Governor Hunter. I just want to reiterate what I heard, which is a great thanks to our interim Director of Advancement, Kevin Platchey, and great thanks to our staffer, Paris Erickson, on behalf of that committee. Thank you so much for supporting the Board of Governors and its work. We could not do it without you. I feel like if I just keep talking slowly and long enough, Governor Cicchetti, who couldn't have been more than 9 car lengths behind the interim executive director, Nevitt.
Maybe Tara just drives a lot faster.
Well, she did make a comment about his driving style, which I won't repeat. But, it is very well possible he might burst through. So I guess I could talk as chair of my committee, the executive committee, which is one of the more get in the weeds, figure out how to support this organization, this body committee. I want to tell you that with the support of fantastic staffer Pam Inglesby, we have I've put together a concrete plan as to how the executive committee is taking over the duties of the Committee on Mission Performance Review, which this body sunsetted at the last meeting. We're going to have a 3-year cycle of meeting with every single board, task force, board, task force, board for, but there's like a, what's the third one I always forget? Councils, councils, right. There's so many of them. We couldn't bring them all in any given year, or these board meetings would have to add an extra day to each one. But what I thought is important for everyone who does service as a governor during their 3-year term to have exposure and get education about them. So what I could do realistically is set up a 3-year rotating schedule where from now, 3 years out, we know exactly who's coming to the board to report and give us an update about what they do and what support they need and what problems we've identified in them. Because from year to year, the Committee on Mission Performance Review gives feedback to the committees. Primarily, are you on mission or not? Or are you meeting the standards of diversity that we're trying to meet? And the executive committee is going to be taking that over. I think it's appropriate that your officers and leaders are the ones doing the hard work and really interacting with these people rather than and getting the most direct contact with this board as possible, as we can do. We also talked about the executive committee charter, which you will find a revised executive committee charter on your agenda for today or tomorrow, I forget which. But that incorporates some of these changes of the duties of the executive committee, including taking over the duties of CMPR. I also, at that meeting, we also talked about potential bylaws that needed to be fixed to make this body work better. One I asked Governor Stevens with working on, which is fixing our definition of quorum. Our definition of quorum, which is currently a majority plus one, has proved problematic, especially when your committees only have 5 people and you end up needing 4 people for a quorum. So Governor Stevens has come up with an elegant and simple fix for that, which will be on the agenda tomorrow for a first read. We also talked about we changed the composition of the executive committee last year such that every class was guaranteed to be represented on the executive committee. And that way we just felt everyone would be having more information, everyone would be having input rather than just the most senior classes, as it were. And but it tends to be that there's more people from the senior classes anyways on the committee, so we thought it might be a good idea. The issue was raised, maybe even by Governor Abell, I don't remember, but that whoever the designate was who was selected by that class could designate an alternate for any particular meeting. And that way, the first-year class would be ensured to make sure they have voice and standing and representation in the decision-makings and discussions happening in the executive committee. And that's an idea, and it's on for first read tomorrow for this body's consideration. Also, we discussed making sure that the president got to work on, as I promised you at the last meeting when I was president-elect, to come up with a policy to address potential conflicts between the chair and voting in the event that the president was not sitting in the chair role. And with the assistance of General Counsel Shanklin, I've drafted a policy outlining what we thought were the most probable and some more improbable scenarios. And that's going to be before you as well as a policy for this BOG to examine. In addition, to meet the requirements of the OPMA, you're going to find a resolution on meeting schedule. This apparently is a very important part of the OPMA because we have to forecast our meetings the whole year in advance, and we file that with the Code Revisor's Office. Is that right? The Code Revisor's Office. I guess the legislature didn't think they had enough to do with their hard job that they have already. But that's another resolution that's going to be before you today and is a necessary part of our compliance with the law of OPMA, which we are currently subject to. So I'll make no hint about it. I hope it's a temporary situation. Finally, I just want to thank the Executive Committee in advance because one part about taking on the CMPR duties is the Executive Committee meetings are going to become a bit longer than they have in the past, and we're going to be because we're going to be spending more time at reviewing things and going over things. And to that end, I think I can buy myself 2 or 3 more minutes by talking about why I'm an hour ahead of my predicted schedule. And I'm an hour ahead of my predicted schedule, and I was a little worried because the training was actually going on a little longer than I expected. But the reason we're an hour ahead of my predicted schedule is, one, I haven't given you all the breaks I could have, I suppose. But also, the OPMA requires us to format the agenda in a very certain way and order. And once you're in that way and order, you can't really deviate from it. If people are expecting things to come in a certain order, they're going to be expecting things to come in a certain order. But I also felt it was very important that we begin starting these meetings with public comment and opportunity for public comment. As you noted, I said at the beginning 3 minutes apiece, because, one, I didn't know how many people would want to make public comment in any particular meeting. I ended up making a call to extend it to 5 minutes based on the number of people I saw in the room. But I wanted to make sure to budget enough time that if a great deal of members came, we would be able to give at least as many people as possible 3 minutes of comment time. We might not always be able to get to all the people, but I want to do a good attempt at it. And I guess today, at least, we had enough time budgeted, maybe a bit much, but it's very hard to predict in advance how much time we would need for people to give comment and give them a sufficient amount of time to make their comments meaningful without cutting them down to 10 seconds apiece or giving people 20 minutes apiece and us going all day. And that is why we are now 1 hour ahead of schedules, because I budgeted that time, and I don't see how else to do it unless we started putting public comments at the end of meetings. But I saw the advantage of having it at the beginning of a meeting is we might get the wisdom when we need it. Members will also have an opportunity to comment when we discuss substantive matters, but that's primarily a time when governors are going to be discussing and making policy statements. And I see a hand.
I actually have a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is Rex Nolte, Broadcast Services Manager for the Washington State Bar Association. So hearing you talk on the public comment and the sign-up sheet, one piece we didn't discuss logistically is those on the phone and those via webcast. How would they get their name on the sheet?
Well, the thing is, we can't require, if you want to speak, I don't think I can require you to sign up on the sheet necessarily. I guess we'll have to look into that question. But I guess I should ask if anyone on the phone, is there anyone on the phone who wished to speak and didn't speak up? Fantastic. There was no one on the phone earlier, I believe, as well. And there may be no one now. Governor Stevens.
Well, no, just I think if we just get into the habit after we're done with who signs up to simply ask that question, that will cover it. It's
Absolutely.
just kind of muscle memory and.
Absolutely. And I think Director Nevitt has a suggestion.
Yeah, I think, when we built the time frames, we tried to make our best guess. I think we could probably do a better job of erring on the side of keeping it tighter, because there's not an OPMA concern if we go a little bit late. It's not ideal. The spirit of it, we think, is that we want people to know when to tune in if they want to hear a particular thing. But I think we probably could err on being a little tighter.
The other thing I could do is I could build in the break after public member comments, and that way we can either run through the break and then reconvene to do the next part. We can either take our break. And public member Nancy Hawkins. I would love your input. Thank you.
Since I don't think that you can keep on explaining for another 50 minutes, maybe we should go back to the interim executive director report that got skipped and hear what happened this morning in Olympia, along with whatever else you were going to report.
Well, you're very prescient.
As she glares at me like, don't make me talk.
You're very, very prescient. Thank you for that segue, which is appropriate at this time. And I guess I would love to introduce I don't know if you heard, this is our 132nd year of member governance. And as the person selected and hired by the board to administrate this organization, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, my interim executive director report appears in your regular materials at page 15. I'd be happy to answer any questions people have about those. But I guess I'll touch on a few things. The first paragraph is, I think, what is really a lot of my focus and the focus of the executive management team and the focus of all the employees at the organization right now, which is working through some of the fiscal what's the word I'm looking for? Some of the suggestions we've gotten from the board this year. So there's sort of two things that are on our mind. One is a reforecast of our budget for FY20. When we approved the budget for FY20, we were very uncertain about what the structure of the organization was going to be, so we largely approved a status quo budget. We are now looking at that budget again, both in part to update our assumptions now that we know that things are going to stay the same. We have a lot more information now than we did when we built that budget. But also, in light of the recommendation that the license fee for 2021 remain the same. As you all know, costs go up every year. So even when we keep the license fee the same, it requires us to look hard at the budget. So we've been working with staff to take that hard look at our budget, to take a hard look at open positions, and to look to reorganize and find efficiencies where we can. That's hard work. It's scary work, but it's something that we're trying to do diligently. And a few other things I'll touch on. President Majumdar came to our staff meeting this month, which is customary. Typically, the president comes to a staff meeting early in their tenure to introduce themselves to the staff and have a bit of dialogue. And there was a lot of spirited dialogue. I was really happy that people came with their questions and really engaged, and that President Majumdar was able to answer questions and engage in the dialogue as well. So I think it was good. I actually am hoping that we might have more opportunities to do that, because I think the more interaction that we can have, the better for the organization. In addition, as Nancy mentioned, I was in Olympia this morning, which is why I'm late. I apologize for that. I was also there yesterday. The Senate Law and Justice Committee and the House Civil Rights and Justice Committee, is that right? They were both had asked to hear from the bar structure work group on their recommendations, and they also decided to invite the executive director to come and report on how we were responding to those to the recommendations and the court's response to the recommendations. So I went, and essentially the message that we were delivering, and I worked in collaboration with our lobbyist, Sanjay Walkavar, and also with President Majumdar and President-elect Kyle Shiketti on figuring out how we were going to respond. Essentially, we made clear that we are seeking to be aligned with the court. We appreciate the court's guidance. We will follow the court's requests. There were a few questions. The subject of bar finances came up. The subject of the Keller deduction came up, and it was both. There were fewer questions than I expected, but there were also a few difficult questions. So you can watch it on TVW if you want to give me some feedback. Any questions?
Gene Cotton, come on down. Oh, I apologize.
Yeah. Do you want Governor Higginson to go
first?
Go ahead. Okay. I watched a live yesterday because I couldn't be there either day, and we had been there earlier this spring. And I, too, encourage everybody, watch the TVW recording rather than discussing individuals here. But it is concerning. Because it looks like the dilemma that occurred last spring is still on the radar, and we need to be prepared for it. So whatever we, in our members' private capacity, I'm the representative of DRAW, obviously. We have a dog in this fight just like everybody else. Whatever we can do to be supportive of making sure the legislature doesn't go into hyper mode like they did last time. We're here, but I can say that the speakers, including Interim Executive Director Nevitt, were very outstanding. Mark Johnson was outstanding. So good job. Thank you very much for putting a good face to the bar.
Thanks.
I have Governor Higginson and then I have Governor Swagel.
I was wondering if Tara, if you have a little more information on exactly how this committee meeting came to pass, if you happen to know. I just was a little curious about how it was constituted, who asked for this, if you have any knowledge on why the legislature wanted to meet with us and where we think we're headed.
Right.
And my comment is related to that.
Sure.
I was on the Supreme Court Structure Work Group. I was not notified of this hearing. I was not invited to attend, and yet you said they wanted to hear from the Structure Work Group. So, you know, that does also sort of raise some concern or perhaps even suspicion in my mind as to,
Sure.
you know, why it was structured that way and how the invitations went out that way.
Sure. I don't entirely know how it was formulated. The first that I heard of it, as you saw in my report, because I'm sure you read it carefully, as part of my role, I serve as a non-voting member of the Board for Judicial Administration, which is chaired by the Chief, Mary Fairhurst. So the first time that I heard about it was a couple months ago. We had heard that that the chief was going to be making a presentation about the work group to the legislature. And we had started communicating about whether we should be there, whether we should be a part of it. A formal invitation didn't come to us until a couple of weeks ago, and it came directly from the committee staff. It wasn't arranged by the chief or by Dory, as far as I know. So I don't know the full story. That's sort of my window into it. And, you know, I'd be happy to try to understand more.
I have a little more insight on that. I think I spoke to Chief Justice Fairhurst about this. I have a little more insight onto that. I spoke to Chief Justice Fairhurst about that. She personally wanted to pick one representative from the majority work group and the minority work group. And I think it was her inclination. She'd prefer it not be a governor from either side. And that's how she picked the people to go talk to the legislature. But I think, honestly, my impression, and even her impression, might have been originally, and I don't know what it ended up being, that the majority of the testimony would come from the majority and minority reports. But I think in the end, they were both asked to cover one slide of the AOC's lobbyists' presentation, overall presentation. Is that right, Director Nevitt?
Yeah, I think the Dory Nickpon, the staff to the work group, provided the majority of the presentation in terms of the overview of the work group, what its charter was, what its scope was, what its process was, and then the members of the work group, Mark Johnson covered what the actual recommendations were, and then Eileen Farley covered what the minority report was.
Governor Higginson?
I was just going to ask, was this a joint, so we can look for it on TVW, was this a joint meeting of the House and the Senate Judiciary Committees, or was this just under a meeting with the House Civil Rights and Judiciary?
There were two separate. So yesterday it was with the Senate. It was not joint. Yesterday it was with the Senate Law and Justice Committee. And then this morning it was with the House Civil Rights and Justice Committee, Judiciary Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Past President Pickett.
I just wanted to kind of follow up and just mention one thing. I know in the past there's been oftentimes like a huge debacle occur when this organization goes to the legislature and addresses them directly, and this board is not fully informed in advance. And I don't know all the details about how this happened. I do know I wasn't informed that it was going to happen in advance. I had no idea that we were, as a body, going to be addressing the legislature, and I would hope that in the future we avoid what's happened in the past where people go to the legislature and we don't know it. Good news is I didn't find out about it ahead of time. I did find out about it after the fact on Facebook was the first notification that I received, and I would appreciate having some advance notice, if nothing else, just to simply know that the Bar Association is going to the legislature.
I just wanted to say I appreciate that. I'm aware of the concern, and in fact, I will share when I was invited, I was deeply concerned that the invite was specific to the executive director, and I'm aware of how that might feel and the concern about it. I did share it immediately with President Majumdar, and I believe that he did communicate it with the board in one of his updates, or that was my understanding.
I'm not sure if I did. I did say it. I'm not sure if I did or not. But again, I want to make clear to everyone: this was not a WSBA organized activity. This was a Supreme Court organized activity to which, fairly late in the process, the WSBA executive director was invited to. Right. Very good. Governor Knight.
Rather than get in too much of a discussion about the mechanics of how this particular invitation happened, it seems like there is a notion in the legislature that a bar association is unnecessary, and there was a go at it a year ago, and it fell apart, and it passed unanimously in the House, essentially. Let's try it again. Can we do something to be more on the offense to try and prevent this? We got caught flat-footed last time. I think my perception is that our members strongly favor the ability to directly elect individuals who will govern the practice of law, as opposed to not having less control. I mean, theoretically, there's some minute degree of control if the Department of Licensing is in charge of the practice of law, or even the Supreme Court, because our justices are elected. But it's not really direct in the way that our current setup allows, where if you have a problem, you talk to your elected governor from that district, and we have a very direct line to members, and the Board of Governors have a very direct line. Can we get a sense of how our members feel about this and how the public feels about it, and try and have some data to present to the legislature? Because I think they want to get reelected. If this is an extremely unpopular position, it's going to have less support. I recognize that sometimes unpopular positions are the right position, and you need to take an unpopular position. It doesn't seem like this is really the kind of thing that falls into that category. So how do we do a better job at messaging?
This is a great idea, and that's why I keep stalling for time, because the point person on this is Governor Cicchetti, and Governor Cicchetti has had conversations with Mary Fairhurst about this whole presentation to the legislature. Governor Cicchetti, one of the things we discussed at Executive Committee once ended up going to Budget and Audit Committee was a proposal to increase our funding for our lobbyist costs this year, so that we can have more time and attention on the ground and expertise on the ground to track these matters and respond to these matters and lobby on these matters. And I would let him speak to that. And I guess they will have time to speak to that, because both Governor Cicchetti and our in-house lobbyists are on the agenda for later this afternoon. So we're going to be able to dissect this issue with a little more expertise and in-hand knowledge than we can at this exact moment, I think. Governor Abel and then Higginson.
So I will reserve most of my comments for when this comes up later on this afternoon. But one thing I would say that I think is probably recognized by many of the people in this room is that this is a fairly predictable situation that the legislature is facing with regard to the future structure of this organization. As all of you likely know, one of the arguments in the last session against the legislature moving forward was that the profession needed the opportunity to do a deep dive into this issue, and the court needed an opportunity to review whatever the recommendations were that came out of the bar structure work group. We completed that process, and it was a wonderful process. I feel actually quite good about the material that we received and the quality of the speakers that we heard from. But as I have explained before, and admittedly I am a member of the minority position out of that work group process, we came up with recommendations that I think can accurately be described as status quo recommendations. So now we have done that. we have kicked that back to the legislature, and I think the legislature, with some justification, is saying, okay, thank you. You've gone through that process. We are now going to engage in our process. So, again, I have additional comments on this issue that can be addressed later on this afternoon, but this is pretty predictable, I think, for us all. Thank you.
Go ahead, Governor Higginson. Oh, we do. Well, maybe we should take a.
Talk to him first.
Should we?
I mean, I just had a couple more questions, so I'm happy to wait, and maybe I'll have
Maybe
them
you should
answered.
put them in the air so Governor Schicchetti can hear them, and we'll ask Governor Clark to put his questions in the air, so Governor Schicchetti can hear them, and then maybe Governor Schicchetti can make words.
So, so my questions were, I guess for Kyle and for Tara, were there other presenters at the Senate and House meetings, or were these just presentations from you and the minority and majority reports? I just wondered if there was any people there with making public comment, or was it strictly, as far as you could tell, for these two committees to hear what you had to say and answer the questions they had?
Right. There was no public comment that I saw, and the only presenters were the majority, the minority, Dory, and myself.
Governor Clark?
I might add to that Professor Spitzer was invited to comment at the Senate committee meeting, but had a scheduling conflict.
Governor Clark? We just turned it off.
I'm sorry. Okay, I just wanted to follow up with my own personal concerns with having been a part of that, and a little frustration, but they're not meant in any way to be a criticism or a dig on the process. But as a member of that committee that met several times over the year, it should be noted that at no time did the committee discuss having a majority and the other report. That was done after the fact, not done in the process. And it was a little frustrating that we got sprung on that when the committee didn't vote on that. Now, with that said, I mean, I certainly understand there were two who felt that the maintaining what we all thought was a good idea, which is our bar as is in effect, as far as to not split. It was frustrating to me that we didn't discuss that as a group first. So, thank you.
Thank you, Governor Clark. Governor Schicchetti, welcome to the meeting. How are you today?
Thank you. I am parking my truck, and so therefore delayed.
I see you're close to us. If I turn around out the window and look at the parking garage, I'll probably see you. So, the truck can't fit in the park. So you are the chair of the BOG Legislative Committee. At this time, we're checking. This is our extended check-in with what's happening with the different committees. I mentioned to the Board of Governors that you would have information about what the Legislative Review BOG Committee is up to, that we had discussed maybe considering having the Legislative Committee review ABA resolutions, since they come on in a matter much similar to the fashion of legislation, and that might be an appropriate committee to deal with it. And what else can you tell us about what the Legislation Committee is up to?
Okay, so before I get into that, can I make one observation about the Structures Work Group, about the comments that were just made?
Well, I think it falls in your purview of legislative committee chair, and it's all the floor is yours, Governor Schicchetti.
All right, and with all respect to Governor Clark, I do believe that early on in one of the meetings, Chief Justice Fairhurst did mention, we didn't know how the work group was going to go. We don't know what the end result was going to be, and we were all having an open mind. But she did mention at one point that there could be multiple reports. We didn't discuss it much. It was an offhand remark. And I think she mentioned it in combination with perhaps another report that has come out in the past where they had majority and minority reports. So that's my recollection on that. Segmenting into the Legislative Review Committee, we have met twice. We will have a proposal this afternoon from CARC, which is the business section, about 2 bills. We are meeting again next week on another bill that we will mention this afternoon as well. And then I'm hoping to schedule a joint meeting between the Board of Governors Legislative Committee and the Legislative Review Committee in mid-December to talk about how those committees can better work with one another and complement each other. And then finally, on the ABA, I agree with President Majumdar that I think the Legislative Review Committee and the Board of Governors Committee might serve a useful purpose for reviewing and supporting ABA initiatives. There's one that was emailed shortly, or yesterday, I believe, and I expect to talk about that further this afternoon as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Governor Shichetti. That is the end of our committee reports. Governor Grabicki.
I have one question with respect to the possibility that the legislature may try to take further action with regard to us in the next session. Has anybody from the executive team or has any member of the BOG or any of the officers sat down with the chair of the House committee and the chair of the Senate committee and asked them their intentions this session with respect to us?
I think Governor Shichetti and I do ever have information about that, but maybe you don't want the answer in public. I don't know, to talk about what we might have our in-chamber negotiations with the legislators. But I think our in-house lobbyists and Governor Shichetti may want to put together a report on that, or they may report on it this afternoon.
Is that something that's appropriate for executive session?
I'm not sure. I'd have to consult with General Counsel. Does any governor have any further comments or questions on committee reports? Any of them, Ms. Cotton, do you have a comment or question on the committee report? Very good.
Follow up to Governor Shichetti's report and Governor Abel's comment. When we were at the legislature this past spring, we not only asked them to stand down for the bar structures work group, one of the critical pieces that we brought up was the work of this body in moving forward with bylaw amendments to regain a bar association that would be better serving of its members. That was a critical piece of it. So it's not just the bar structures work group. And unfortunately, in response to Governor Knight's question, I'm not. My impression from knowing these legislators and appearing before them and communicating with them in the past, on a number of occasions, isn't so much an anger or an angst with the people sitting in this room right now. It's with people who had sat in this room a few years ago and what they did. And in particular, as an example, Senator Padden does not forget quickly what occurred in Spokane on the last referendum. That's stuck in his mind. And, he wasn't even at the meeting. I was. Rajiv, you were there.
Yes, ma'am.
Bill was there. He hasn't forgotten that, and he had constituents very angry about that. So the focus is really on you guys and moving forward into reasserting the respect of this organization for its members and the public that was lost because of some actions of some of your predecessors, not all of them. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of clarify that because it's not just about the bar structures work group.
It's a good point, Ms. Cotton. It's very important that we as a body provide a unified and civil and face to this organization, and that the actions we take have consequences. And frankly, our unity with the membership is one of our potential greatest strengths. And when we have disunity with the membership, that's one of our potential biggest liabilities, as it has turned into at the legislature. But I want to thank you all for your committee reports. I look forward to hearing more in depth on certain items for the rest of the meeting of the next 2 days, and I look forward from hearing regular committee reports through the rest of the year in all our meetings. I think this has been educational for everyone. We will be in recess until 1 o'clock, but I want to remind all the governors, staffs, and guests that we have a very important lunch today with the class of Washington Leadership Initiative Fellows, which is usually one of the highlights of the year. So I look forward to that. I'll see you all reconvened at 1 o'clock, if not before then.